Anyway, more competitive Pokemon talk. So for the first, this is just a little this is a little prologue. This is not what the thing's going to be about. But it's something I wanted to a little bit go over at the time more recent meta. These things are going to get uploaded in fucking 10 years. No one's going to fucking give a shit about Gen 9. But kind of semi recent meta. I've been playing some Gen 9. I've been doing a bit of laddering OU post home meta. Like DLC's not out, but home's out, so you can run all the Hisuian mons. And just a little thing I wanted to go over before I really get started with the main topic I wanted to talk about is so Great Tusk versus Landorus T. But so Landorus T is in the meta, right? And it's seeing use because it's Landorus T. It's never gonna not see use, but it's not seeing as much use as you'd think, right? Like Landorus T at its peak was 77% use, which is the amount of use that Great Tusk is seeing right now, and Landorus T's not seeing that much. It's seeing a normal amount, 15 to 30%, which is fairly standard for a typical OU mon. But Landorus T is not a fucking typical OU mon. It is Jod himself. Landorus T is Mr. Landorus T is John OU. He is Mr. OU. So the fact that he's seeing this little, while Great Tusk is seeing upwards of 70%. Okay, amounts not seen since Gen 5 Lando, late Gen 5, after people figured out how good it was. That's incredible. But what, and the reason is they kind of fill a similar role, but I'm not sure 100% why Great Tusk is better. I think the reason Great Tusk has a bit more attack, not a lot, but some. Headlong Rush is also a stronger move, but I think the big reason is Rapid Spin, and Rapid Spin is ultimately the big difference. Great Tusk has more defense than Landorus T, yes, but Landorus T has Intimidate, so it kind of evens out. Great Tusk doesn't have a double ice weakness, but it's also resistant against fewer things, and it doesn't have that ground immunity. Landorus T is weak against ice and water, and that's it. Great Tusk is weak against ice, water, grass, fairy, flying, and psychic. So that's obviously worse, but not being double ice weak is also good, so it also kind of evens out. Landorus T is technically faster, but it's by 12 points. So it barely matters. I don't think there's anything in between their two speed tiers that's relevant. Nothing I can think of. At least not in this gen, and at least not in OU. Ultimately, they're very similar. They're both bulky attackers that can be fast if they want to be, but I think the big difference is Rapid Spin. And here's the reason I wanted to talk about this. Landorus T had a lot of different sets back in the day, and it does still. Landorus T has a lot of different sets, and Great Tusk also currently has a lot of different sets. But at the end of the day, years into the meta, several gens in, several years in, if you look at the rankings, and if you do an objective metagame analysis by usage, and based on what it was surrounded by, I would say it is a fairly objective statement to say that the best Landorus T set, statistically, was the Choice Scarf set. That is not to say that you should always run the Choice Scarf set. I'm just saying it's useful it's useful on the most teams in the most situations. Certainly there are situations where you would want to run other things, and teams where you would want to run other things more of the time. But generally speaking, the best Landorus T set was always the Choice Scarf set. Well, maybe not always. I wasn't there for Gen 5, but for the extent of the time that I played, it was the Choice Scarf set. Interesting thing about Great Tusk, despite having a very similar role to Landorus T, there's not a Choice Scarf set. You can run it with Choice Scarf, you can do anything you want. Who's gonna fucking stop you? Me? I won't. But there's not a listed Smogon set for Scarf Great Tusk, and you don't really see them running around. I played for it wasn't that long, to be honest. It was like a month or two. like not even a month or two. It was like a month. But I saw like maybe one Great Tusk set in like a couple hundred games. Like maybe one Scarf Great Tusk set in like a couple hundred games. So like there's not really a Scarf Great Tusk set. And the reason why I think is pretty simple. It's just it's Rapid Spin. See, Landorus T, I don't think it ever had Defog. And Rapid Spin is something you want. Especially, like, you want hazard removal. Hazard removal is big. And especially in a post-home metagame, hazard removal is big. Because, like, I'm going to be honest. Hisuian Samurot's going to fall. It's going to drop in usage. It hasn't. It hasn't happened yet. New Toy Syndrome, if you follow False Swipe Gaming. But, yeah, hazards, they were always a big deal. And they're especially relevant now with Hisuian Samurott and to a vastly lesser degree Cleavor. I ran both Hisuian Samurott and Cleavor on my team. Cleavor honestly performed better, but I can definitely see why people like Hisuian Samurott. Dark Water is a surprisingly good typing. And being able to stack 3 layers of spikes while attacking, always nice. So, like, hazards were always, very important. And they're especially important now. And so having that Rapid Spin is extremely important. Landorus T never had any form of hazard removal. I think maybe it had Defog at one point, but I'm not even 100%. Don't quote me on that. I could be just hallucinating that. The point is, it didn't for most of its existence. So having that, even just having Rapid Spin for the hazard removal is big, and it's important, and it's something you'd want. In Generation 8, Rapid Spin was buffed. It had its base damage increased from 20 actually to 50, my bad. I think it was 20 and then it went up to 40 in Gen 8 and then it went up to 50 in Gen 9. I think that's what happened. It's 50 now and it was 20 at one point. I don't remember when exactly everything happened. But that is what happened. The damage was increased from 20 to 50 over some period of time, and it's at 50 now. The bigger, more relevant thing, though, is it also gives a +1 to speed. And that is the very long-winded explanation of why Great Tusk does not run Choice Scarf. Because if you always want to run it with Rapid Spin, like, quote-unquote always. Again, you could run it without Rapid Spin. You could do that. You could run just like a full, not even like a full-on attack, because you could run like I was running AV and I still had Rapid Spin because it's still an attack. But you could theoretically run, like, stabs and coverage. Like, you wouldn't be wrong, necessarily, to say, like, CC, EQ or Headlong Rush, Knock, and Ice Spinner. Or even, like, Trailblaze. Well, no, okay. You'd be wrong to say Trailblaze over Rapid Spin. Like, that is... If you pick Trailblaze over Rapid Spin, you were not correct. The only potential argument I could see for that is, like, if you aren't confident in your ability to predict the Dengo switch in. So you want to just be able to click a button and have the thing work, unless your opponent's running something with Sap Zipper, which nothing's huge with Sap Zipper right now in OU. There's stuff out there that has it, but the biggest threat you're going to see is, like, Azumarill, and that's, like... Sap Zipper's niche even on Azumarill because you want to run huge power. And Azumarill itself is already niche. It's not that great. The Belly Drum set it has some sweet potential, but it suffers from the fact that Azumarill is not a fast Pokemon, and its attack is actually not that high. Like, Azumarill's base 50 attack, it just has huge power, which brings it up to a respectable number, but if you then Belly Drum, that doesn't bring you up, that doesn't, like, huge power plus Belly Drum stacks, but it does not compound. So if you have huge power plus Belly Drum on Azumarill, what you have is a base 50 attack Mon at functionally +8. Which is, strong, but it's not like use base 40 Aqua Jet and one-shot everything. Strong. Like, you need at least either super effective or, like, neutral with, like, play rough. Like you can't just click anything and get the one-shot. And that ultimately is the problem, because Azumarill is also not that fast, and it's bulky enough, but you're also using Belly Drum. So at best, you're going to be at 50%, because at best you're going to be at 75% after your Citrus Berry. I don't know. This was a tangent. It's not ultimately related to what I was talking about. The point is, don't run Trailblaze over Rapid Spin. But you could theoretically not run Rapid Spin on Great Tusk. But, like, Rapid Spin is just overwhelmingly the set that most people want. And it's pretty clear why. Because, the hazard removal is so important, but also the speed boost. And, if you compare it to Landorus T, which is obviously a very accurate comparison, they're both physically bulky ground types with high attack that had a over 70% usage. And their speed's very similar, and Choice Scarf Landorus T was quite the strong set. Rapid Spin, Great Tusk, it needs a turn to set up the Rapid Spin if it wants to get that +1 speed, but once it has it, then it has the ability to actually, like, pick moves and select coverage. And then on top of that, a tool in Landorus T's kit that Great Tusk does not have is U-turn. U-turn on Scarf Landorus T, that U-turn is the choice item move, not even just choice scarf, like choice scarf or band. Probably not really specs, but U-turn is the choice scarf or choice band move, kind of. Like that's a move you almost always will want if you can get it. Like, you can run choice scarfers, choice banders without it. That's certainly an option, but it synergizes very well. And Landorus T has that, and Great Tusk doesn't. So ultimately, the reason that Great Tusk, despite being very similar to Landorus T, does not run Choice Scarf, which is the definitive Landorus, well, not the definitive, but the number one Landorus T set, is it has access to Rapid Spin and wants to run it, and after the buffs, Rapid Spin gives the same +1 to speed that Choice Scarf gives without the drawback of being locked into one move. It has its own drawback, but Great Tusk does not have access to U-turn, which makes it preferable not to run Choice Scarf if you can avoid running it. That was just the thing I wanted to talk. Anyway, the main topic for today's discussion is poison. Just a little nice, simple, poison and how to avoid it. Because there's a surprisingly diverse number of ways to avoid being poisoned. It's just basic. You're learning to play competitive Pokemon. It's something you should know, because it's gonna come up. And maybe not as much now in Gen 9, because they significantly reduced distribution on Toxic. Like, fucking 7 things have it now. But, you should still know. And especially if you play past gens, but even now, you should know how to avoid poison. So, the number one most obvious way to avoid poison is to switch in a Pokemon that's poison or steel type. Poison or steel types can't be poisoned. However, this is not 100% effective. For one thing, you might not have a poison or steel type, or if you do have a poison or steel type, you might not necessarily want to switch it in, or it might have gotten killed. For whatever reason, it might not be available. Shit happens. Alternatively, and not more importantly, but more interestingly, there are a couple of cases where this may not be effective. If your opponent is running Salazzle has the ability Corrosion. Actually, Salazzle or Glamora. Glamora also has access to Corrosion, and while Corrosion Glamora isn't the standard set, it is the based set. So, there's that. What Corrosion does is it removes the immunity of poison and steel types to poison. Now, the way that it's programmed, poison and steel types still take normal damage from poison, they're just immune to being poisoned. So corrosion just removes that. The other way that you could potentially get poisoned is a kind of older set, as much older as like Gen 7 is. It was like, what, 8 or 9 years ago now? So like a bit ago, but not like super long ago. Not like Gen 3. Pyukumuku. The set that Pyukumuku would run was block, recover, toxic, and soak. So what you block your opponent in with a Pokemon that can't really do anything to Pyukumuku. Or I guess if you recover or rest, either one would work. You block your opponent so they can't switch, and you want to do it on a Pokemon that can't do anything to Pyukumuku. Then you click Soak. Soak switches, like, whatever your current type is, you're no longer that type, you are a water type. Pure water. That is your type now. And then it clicks Toxic. It used this to, to get Toxic off on Poison or Steel types. And even if you didn't use Block, just being soaked and then poisoned at all, it like that retains even after you become no longer a water type. You're still toxic. And like even if you just get soaked, okay, you can switch out, sure, but then you're getting something else toxic, so you would need to have something else that has some kind of immunity to it. So, I want to talk about the ways to avoid poison that are not just using a poison or steel type. The number one way to avoid poison is through some sort of ability. See, shit like corrosion, it poisons you, but being poisoned is not the end of the world. There are a few abilities that can make poison sort of pointless. The not most well-known, but most relevant of these is Poison Heal. Poison Heal is the classic ability of Breloom, but it's more notable for its usage on Gliscor. Big in Gen 7, which, you know me. That Gen 7 is my baby. What Poison Heal does is, instead of taking damage from poison, including badly poisoned, because those are different, there's a difference between being poisoned and badly poisoned. Badly poisoned is inflicted by 2 layers of toxic spikes or by the move toxic. Poisoned is inflicted by basically anything else that says poisoned. Being poisoned gives you 12.5% damage at the end of each turn. Being badly poisoned works a little bit more complicated of a way. I'll explain it if you don't understand it. That's fine. It's easy to understand once you see it, but it's going to sound more complicated than it actually is. Badly poisoned does 6.25% damage times the number of turns you've been switched in. So you get badly poisoned, you take 6.25 at the end of turn. Then at the end of your next turn, you take 12.5. Then at the end of your next turn, 18.75, and it just keeps increasing like that. So, like, in total, first turn you take 6.25, then second turn you take 12.5, so in total you will have then taken 18.75. And then next turn you take 18.75, so, it works like that. Badly poisoned is the one you want to worry about. Being poisoned is not great, but there's a lot of worse status conditions you could have. Being poisoned is a lot more of a manageable status condition. Badly poisoned is not that. Anyway, Poison Heal, it works on both poison and badly poisoned, and it changes the moves. It changes the status condition from damaging you at the end of each turn to healing you. It just heals you a flat 12.5% HP, regardless of whether it's poison or badly poisoned. But that's still a lot of healing, and more importantly, you're not taking damage. Also, if you're poisoned, you're then immune to other status conditions, and that brings me into the next way to gain immunity to being poisoned. That is having another status condition. Now, you might think this would be kind of hard to predict. Like, generally, you want to avoid getting status at all. So, sure, it might be good to know that if you, for example, switch in a special attacker on a Will-O-Wisp, then that special attacker now can't be poisoned, but how are you going to predict? But it requires a high level of skill to even predict that in battle, and you definitely can't plan around it out of battle. Well, that only applies to status conditions inflicted by your opponent. there are a couple of situations in which you would actually want to inflict a status condition on yourself. The first is a little ability called Guts. The effect of Guts is that if you have a status condition, your moves deal 1.5 times damage. They get a +1 to their damage. This is effectively a free choice band. Well, not free, because you have to be statused, but it's a choice band without the restriction of being locked to one move. Now, you do have to be statused, but what people will do is they will use the Flame Orb item. Now, you might think this would be counterintuitive, because Flame Orb cuts the damage of all physical moves by 50%. And I don't know if Guts actually increases the damage of special moves, but I do know that every single Guts user is a physical attacker, or just doesn't... Well, every single Guts user that's an attacker is a physical attacker. However, Guts also removes the nerf from... Guts also removes the damage reduction from being burned. So, if you're burned while having Guts, your moves do 1.5 times damage, and they do not have their damage reduced by being burned. You do take the 6.25 damage at the end of each turn, but by having a status condition, you are not susceptible to any other status conditions, which allows you to also use this to block being poisoned. The only limitation is that you have to not get poisoned before your Flame Orb can go off. Basically, the Pokemon just has to be in for one turn and not get poisoned. You can get poisoned in that one turn, but it's not common. This is also useful for blocking other status conditions besides just poison. Most notably, Amoonguss' Spore. But there's also a lot of Thunder Wave running around, and this is also helpful for that. Thunder Wave Paralysis. Guts is also used... Guts with Flame Orb is also commonly used in concert with the move Facade, which is a 70 base damage normal move. Normally, you don't want to run normal type moves because... Well, normal type attacks, because, they're not super effective against anything. But the effect of Facade is that it does double damage when you have a status condition. So, especially if you're a normal type, base 140 damage move, because it's base 70 damage, and then it gets ×2 if you have a status condition, boosted by Guts, that specific set is why Ursaring is not top of the meta, but kind of meta right now. Not Ursaring, Ursaluna, my bad. Evolution of Ursaring. Theoretically, you could also do that on Ursaring, but, people, it was okay in, RU and NU back in the day, but now there's just kind of no reason to run Ursaring without Eviolite. The other situation in which you would use a self-inflicted status condition to avoid getting poisoned is Rest. So, Rest is a move which fully restores your HP, but puts you to sleep for exactly 2 turns, which is not how sleep normally works. Normally it's 1 turn, and then a 50% chance to wake up, and then another 50% chance to wake up, and then you just wake up. So minimum of 1 turn and maximum of 3 turns, but it's randomized in between those 2. However, Rest always lasts exactly 2 turns, plus the turn you cast it on, so you're effectively wasting 3 turns for a full heal, and it puts you to sleep. Now, not only does Rest put you to sleep, which renders you immune to being poisoned since you're asleep, but Rest is the only instance I can think of in the game of a status condition that actually overrides other status conditions. So not only does Rest prevent you from being poisoned while you're asleep, but it actually cures you of your poison if you have it, or any other status condition. So you can also use it to remove paralysis or burn. You can't use it. You could theoretically use it to remove freeze, but you can't use moves while you're frozen. So there's no way to actually do that. Now, being asleep for 2 turns is not the greatest thing. However, there are a couple ways to deal with this. There are a couple ways to deal with this. The first way to deal with it is to also run the move Sleep Talk. Sleep Talk allows you to use another move while you're asleep. Unfortunately, you don't get to pick which move, so it's semi-random. This is a common set on Dondozo right now, but it's always sort of been around. I don't like this set very much because it's a set on Dondozo. It's just the set is always Rest, Sleep Talk, either Bulk Up or Calm Mind, and 1 attack. That's always what it is. I don't like it. I get why you want to run Bulk Up or Calm Mind, because you want to use your survivability offered by Rest to just sort of build up and then steamroll. The problem is, if your opponent just has anything that's immune to your one attack, it completely stuffs the entire set and removes like all the setup you did. It renders it completely pointless. It's a bit better on Dondozo because it uses a water stab as opposed to what 90% of Pokemon that try and do this with use, which is either a normal or fighting stab in the case of physical attackers or a psychic stab in the case of special attackers. But even Dondozo is still susceptible to getting stuffed by like Gastrodon or even another Dondozo, to be honest. Since that would just come down to a PP stall war, but if you've started your setup, Dondozo's unaware renders that moot point, and then you just lose the stall war against the opposing Dondozo. Which, you know, I'm sure you could play around, but like nobody wants to do that. Like even a stall player doesn't want to get into a stall war. They just want to win the game by being a bitch. I ran a little bit of stall, and it is like crack. Like it is the dark side of the Force. Like, I completely get it. It's so fun. And I've done a complete 180, but, don't still, because if you run stall, you're a shitty person. I was running stall with mono, which is a bit more, like, it still sucks to deal with, but it's a bit more forgivable, because there's, like, 40 teams in mono total. So the limited amount of teams means running any one of them is more forgivable, I feel. I mean, that it could just be copium, but also, like, who gives a shit? Like, to be honest, like, if you're playing mono and you don't know how to deal with stall, like, that's kind of on you.